Did you know, in the books, the River Lords are some of the most loyal and bravest men in Westeros for supporting Rhaenyra while surrounded by Green loyalists? Gyldayn writes, "When Prince Daemon sent forth his call to arms, they rose up all along the rivers, knights and men-at-arms and humble peasants who yet remembered the realm's delight, so beloved of her father, and the way she smiled and charmed them as she made her progress through the riverlands in her youth. Hundreds and then thousands buckled on their sword belts and donned their mail, or grabbed a pitchfork or a hoe and a crude wooden shield, and began to make their way to Harrenhal to fight for Viserys' little girl. The Lords of the Trident, having more to lose, were not so quick to move, but soon enough they began to throw their lots in with the Queen. From the twins rode Sir Forrest Frey, the very same fool Frey who had once begged for Rhaenyra's hand, now grown into a most puissant knight. Lord Samwell Blackwood, who had once lost a duel for her favour, raised her banners over Raventree. Sir Amis Bracken, who had won that duel, followed his lord father when House Bracken declared for Aegon. The Mootons of Maidenpool, the Pipers of Pink Maiden Castle, the Roots of Harroway, the Darrys of Darry, the Malisters of Seaguard, and the Vances of Wayfarer's Rest all announced their support for Rhaenyra. The Vances of Atranta took the other path and trumpeted their allegiance to the young king. Peter Piper, the grizzled lord of Pink Maiden, spoke for many when he said, "I swore her my sword. I'm older now, but not so old that I've forgotten the words I said, and it happens I still have the sword." This goes to show that the Old Town conspiracy myth that the men of Westeros would never serve a woman is a complete lie. It's also great to see that Viserys was smart to have Rhaenyra do a royal progress through the Riverlands and Reach in 113 AC, since this tour is the reason why so many houses come to fight and die for her a decade later, because they remembered their vows to their old king, and the oaths they swore to his daughter, the realm's delight. Because if the Greens had secured the Riverlands under Grover Tully, then the Old Town and Lannister armies would have had a clear path to march their armies to King's Landing. Gyldayn writes, "The Lord Paramount of the Trident, Grover Tully, had been an old man even at the Great Council of 101, where he spoke for Prince Viserys, though now failing, he was no less stubborn. He had favoured the rights of the male claimant in 101, and the years had not changed his views. Lord Grover insisted that Riverrun would fight for young King Aegon, yet no such word went forth. The old lord was bedridden and would not live much longer. Riverrun's maester had declared, 'I would sooner the rest of us did not die with him,' declared Sir Elmo Tully, his grandson. Riverrun had no defense against Dragonfire, he pointed out to his own sons, and both sides in this fight rode dragons. And so whilst Lord Grover thundered and fulminated from his deathbed, Riverrun barred its gates, manned its walls, and held its silence." So the show had Daemon stupidly tell Oscar Tully to murder his grandfather, which he refuses because he loves his grandfather. Instead, the show should have had House Tully be staunch Green supporters only for Daemon to invite Oscar to Harrenhal, and once there, Daemon recommends to Oscar that instead of declaring for Aegon immediately like his grandfather wants, he should wait. So that way, when Daemon goes and deals with the Brackens, Oscar then decides that Daemon and Rhaenyra are the winning side and waits for his grandfather to pass before declaring his support for them. It would have made Daemon look so much better, and Season 2 much more enjoyable to watch. Also, the show needs more maps to show where all the armies are and how each of them are trying to get to King's Landing, so when Fish Feed happens, we know why the Lannisters had to fight against Rhaenyra's loyalist forces in the Riverlands. Gyldayn writes, Meanwhile, a very different story was playing out to the east, where Jacaerys Valerion descended upon the Eyrie on his young dragon, Vermax, to win the Vale of Arryn for his mother. The Maiden of the Vale, Lady Jean Arryn, was 5 and 30, 20 years his senior. Never wed, Lady Jean had reigned over the Vale since the death of her father and elder brothers at the hands of the Stone Crows of the Hills when she was 3. Mushroom tells us that this famous maiden was in truth highborn harlot with a ferocious appetite for men, and gives us a salacious tale of how she offered Prince Jacaerys the allegiance of the Vale only if he could bring her to her climax with his tongue. Septon Eustace repeats the widespread rumor that Jean Arryn preferred the intimate companionship of other women, then goes on to say it was not true. In this instance, we must be grateful for Grand Maester Munkin's true telling, for he alone confines himself to the high hall of the Eyrie, rather than its bedchambers. Thrice have my own kin sought to replace me, Lady Jean told Prince Jacaerys. My cousin Sir Arnold is wont to say that women are too soft to rule. I have him in one of my sky cells, if you would like to ask him. Your Prince Daemon used his first wife most cruelly, it is true, but notwithstanding your mother's poor taste in consorts, she remains our rightful queen, and mine own blood besides, and Arryn on her mother's side. In this world of men, we women must band together. The show really goes out of its way not to include Jean Arryn as much as possible. She was the ruler of the Vale when Daemon was married to Ray Royce, and after she died, Daemon went to Jean and requested Runestone and its lands and incomes go to him. But Jean refused him because he was a neglectful husband after Ray couldn't produce any children for him. However, Daemon only married her to help the Zerra secure the Vale in the Great Council of 101 to ensure Balon's line succeeded to the Iron Throne over Rhaenys. Ironically, Rhaenyra has the same houses supporting her as Rhaenys, except House Baratheon and Arryn have swapped sides. Gyldayn writes, "The Vale and its knights will stand with her, if her grace will grant me one request." When the prince asked what that might be, she answered, "Dragons. I have no fear of armies. Many and more have broken themselves against my bloody gate, and the Eyrie is known to be impregnable. But you have descended on us from the sky, as Queen Visenya once did during the conquest, and I was powerless to halt you. I mislike feeling powerless. Send me dragon riders." And so the prince agreed, and Lady Jean knelt before him and bade her warriors to kneel, and all swore him their swords. Then on Jacaerys' sword, north across the fingers and the waters of the Bight, he lighted briefly at Sisterton, where Lord Borrell and Lord Sunderland did obeisance to him and pledged him the support of the three sisters, then flew on to White Harbour, where Lord Desmond Manderley met with him in his merman's court. Here, the prince faced a shrewder bargainer. "White Harbour is not unsympathetic to your mother's flight," Manderley declared. "Mine own forebears were despoiled of their birthright when our enemies drove us into exile on these cold northern shores. When the old king visited us so long ago, he spoke of the wrong that had been done to us and promised to make redress. In pledge of that, his grace offered the hand of his daughter, Princess Viseria, to my great-grandsire, that our two houses might be made as one. But the girl died and the promise was forgotten." Prince Jacaerys knew what was being asked of him. Before he left White Harbour, a compact was drawn up and signed, by the terms of which Lord Manderley's youngest daughter would be wed to the prince's brother Joffrey once the war was over. So Jace did a good job here, and proved he would have made a good king. Also, this Manderley marriage alliance becomes extremely important after the Dance of the Dragons is over, since Desmond's son, Torrhen Manderley, becomes the de facto ruler of the Seven Kingdoms for a while. We also just met Torrhen Manderley in episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon. Sisterton is also where Davos Seaworth ends up in A Dance with Dragons on his way to White Harbour, and so did Ned Stark during Robert's Rebellion, Thus, the islands always seem to herald important people arriving on its shores in turbulent times. Gildane writes, "Finally, Vermax carried Jacaerys Valerion to Winterfell to treat with its formidable young lord, Cregan Stark. In the fullness of time, Cregan Stark would become known as the Old Man of the North, but the Lord of Winterfell was but 21 when Prince Jacaerys came to him in 129 AC. Cregan had come into his lordship at 13 upon the death of his father, Lord Rickon, in 121 AC. During his minority, his uncle Bernard had ruled the north as regent, but in 124 AC, Cregan turned 16, only to find his uncle slow to surrender his power. Relations between the two grew strained, as the young lord chafed under the limits imposed upon him by his father's brother. Finally, in 126 AC, Cregan Stark rose up, imprisoned Bernard and his 3 sons, and took the rule of the north into his own hands. Soon after, he wed Lady Rhaenyra, a beloved companion since childhood, only to have her die in 128 AC whilst giving birth to a son and heir, whom Cregan named Rickon after his father. Autumn was well advanced when the Prince of Dragonstone came to Winterfell. The snows lay deep upon the ground, a cold wind was howling from the north, and Lord Stark was in the midst of his preparations for the coming winter. Yet he gave Jacaerys a warm welcome. Snow and ice and cold made Vermax ill-tempered, it is said, so the prince did not linger long amongst the Northmen. But many a curious tale come out of that short visit. So the show had them meet at the Wall, which honestly was interesting to see and not a bad choice for Jace to receive word of his brother's death. However, it would have been great if in Season 1 of House of the Dragon, we met Cregan Stark as a young boy in the first 5 episodes under the thumb of his uncle and cousins, only to time skip in episodes 6 to 10 to see Cregan older and biding his time before striking against his uncle. Maybe have his uncle Bernard planning to support Aegon, only for Cregan to use that as pretext to overthrow his dishonorable uncle and reclaim Winterfell. Anyway, what do you think?